Right, welcome to the ramp. My name is Monty Garlic, and our podcast is designed to talk about issues and resources dealing with PTSD that people suffer from. My friend, my producer, and I come at this through being in the military. That's where our PTSD is from. We understand there's a lot of people out there with PTSD that weren't in the military, and we want to include those people in this as well. We've got a guest with us today. Her name is Debbie Tolton, and her and I will be discussing these different ways of helping yourself and resources that we have available to us to try and get help for us. I am a retired Army veteran. I spent a little over 20 years in the infantry. My travels around the world took me to a lot of different places. My combat service was in Desert Storm over in the Middle East, and then I had subsequent deployments over there. I was deployed over there a total of 4 different times, and that's where my PTSD stems from, is my experiences over there. I dealt with the PTSD for, well, I retired from the service about 20 years ago, and I've been in therapy now for about 5 years. So I dealt with the PTSD for 15 years on my own and got to a pretty dark place. I was pretty suicidal and had a plan and almost carried that plan out a few times. My wife is the one that finally got me to go to the VA to get some help, and that's where I met Debbie, and my recovery and healing started at that point. I wanted to do this podcast because of what Debbie did for me. I look back and realize what a dark place I was in and how easily it would have been to just end it all. And there's too many people out there that are taking that path, and I want to try and change that, because there is a life worth living after the military, and sometimes we lose sight of that. So that's what we want to try and accomplish with the podcast, that we want people to understand that there is hope out there and that we should never give up on that hope. So I'll let Debbie just kind of introduce herself and give us her background and just some information about herself and how it relates to what we're trying to do here. Debbie?
Okay, thank you, Monty. Thanks for those powerful words. Very appreciated, especially reaching out to so many people who need help. So I worked for a number of years in other government organizations. I worked for IRS, the Forest Service, but I had a degree in psychology and knew I always wanted to do this work. Even when I was in my undergrad, I wrote a report on the psychology of war, and there wasn't even really information about it back then. We didn't have computers. You had to go to the library in person. I know people of today's generation don't even know what that means, but it was a lot of legwork going and trying to find information, and there really was very little. PTSD was first given an official diagnosis in 1980 in the DSM, and it's the first time we realized it's caused by etiology outside of someone. It's not something happening into you or inside of you. It's something you've been exposed to, and you put enough stress and trauma on someone, and after a time, they're going to start dealing with symptoms. So I knew I was interested, and I finally made the change, went to graduate school, and then did my internship at the VA and got hired on there. I helped set up the first telehealth VA station in the nation, and wrote the program on substance abuse and helped with the PTSD program. And so I worked with many vets with PTSD over the years, the almost 18 years I was at the VA. And I know that it's a work that needs to continue, and it's growing every day. We're finding more and more out about what PTSD is and how it really affects people. So happy to be here today.
Yeah, and we're certainly happy that you agreed to come on here. I asked Debbie, we wanted to, kind of know why she agreed to do this, and she said, well, it's because you asked me to. And I said, well, I think there's a little bit more to it than that. Debbie's always very concerned about helping people and making sure they get the help that they want. And so I think, deep down that's probably another reason why she's agreed to do this. Just kind of a funny story along that line. I was talking to my sister-in-law last night, who is also a therapist, and we were talking about things. And Debbie, I'm sure you remember this. There were days when our group got finished, and I would ask Debbie if she ever left that room just shaking her head, thinking, I'm not getting through to these guys at all.
No, you guys were great. Great.
Well, so like I said, after dealing with my PTSD for about 15 years, I finally went to the VA, and the first person that they assigned me to wasn't a very good fit for me. And because of the experience that I had there, I almost decided just to forget about it because of all the horror stories that we hear about the VA, and that they don't really care about us, and we're just kind of a number to them. And I had almost decided not to go back. And then my family practice doctor at the VA told me I should just try one more time and try a different person. And that's when I met Debbie, and that's when my healing started. And like I said, I was in a pretty dark place at first, and she was very patient with me, and seemed to know the right things to do, the right things to say, those kind of things that kind of get you in a comfortable place where you're willing to talk and you're willing to go to some of those places that you don't like to go to in your head. So, Debbie, along with this, how much are veterans held back by their unwillingness to recognize their own disorders?
Well, it's a great barrier for so many reasons. There's this natural inclination to want to be independent and work through things. Like, I've got this, I'll figure it out, I'll make it work. There's stigma that happens sometimes, even with the military. If you go out and try to get that help, sometimes people worry about what that will do to their professional career, security clearances, other things that they have concerns about, so they'll hold back on that. I appreciate families who encourage people to go get help, like your wife did. That's such a support. And, it is trying to work with veterans. I can't even tell you the number of vets that have said, after they went through treatment, I wish I would have done this years ago. I wish I didn't struggle all these years with holding back, not connecting with my family, isolating away from everyone or different situations, if I would have just done this sooner. And how do you get people to see that? That's what matters. Let them see they can reclaim their life if they're willing to just get out there.
There is a lot, I never thought about that part of it, but there is a lot of that stuff we miss out on because of, our lack of help. I look back on the things that I did before I started my treatment, and, I withdrew myself from my family to the point where, I just wasn't doing anything with them hardly. And yeah, you're right. I mean, I think all of us realize that when we finally understand the help that we can get and get that help, that we just shake our heads and think, wow, why didn't I do this before?
Yeah.
I know you're into a different type of helping. You just can't seem to get away from helping people. And do you find that reluctance recognize PTSD with people that weren't in the military?
Yes, for a lot of different reasons. Either access to the system or understanding that they need help. Fear sometimes. There's a lot of different reasons. There's barriers to them connecting to help. And so it's one of the reasons I think this podcast is so important. If we can break down some of what is stopping people and help them see that there's great potential in reclaiming their life and healing that can come from it. And there's a lot of different types of treatment. I mean, talk therapy is one, but there's so many different components to treatment that can make a difference. And we've talked about this, that there's no one right fit. Everyone's different.
Yeah, I think we talked a little bit about that just yesterday, that, every different type of treatment works, but not every type of treatment works for everyone. And so we have to find the right type of treatment. I know you tried 2 or 3 different types with me. Not tried, we worked with those things, and the ones that we worked with worked for me very well. The one that you talked to us a lot about in group was the mindfulness, and like Greg pointed out, just being in the moment and trying to enjoy the moment. And if you have to sit and meditate or breathe or whatever it might be to bring yourself back to that moment, that mindfulness seems to be a great tool, at least for me. And I would assume in your experience, you've seen that work for a lot of people, haven't you?
I have, and there's some things I would like to discuss about that for sure, but I definitely want people to not give up if they don't find the right therapist. I think that's a huge piece of making it work. And you kind of mentioned this, finding a fit, but we talk a lot about goodness of fit. It's like looking at that when you're working with someone. Not everyone, not only does not every therapy work for everyone, not every therapist works for everyone. I mean, people have to work with someone that they're comfortable with, that they connect with, and it really needs to be this two-way therapeutic alliance relationship that people are connecting well. And, so I just encourage people, it's like, don't give up if you don't find the right person. In today's world where we're doing so much by teletherapy now, it would be easier to go and maybe do some therapist shopping and find someone that fits, that you connect with. And it can be a little bit more of an interview on your end, that you're making sure that you're comfortable with that person. So, I just really encourage, look for what feels comfortable and good, because we know Scott Miller I think he did a big meta-analysis on all the different types of treatment that worked. And the one thing they found that was the most important was that therapeutic alliance, making sure it's a good connection with you and who you're working with. Otherwise, people will walk away and they'll be done.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that's the thing. I think that's one of the problems that the veterans run into. The people outside the military, I think, especially in today's environment where a lot of this telecommunicating is going on, you can shop a little bit more than maybe you would have or could have before this. But the veterans don't feel like they can do that. I don't think in a lot of cases, they go in, they're assigned someone, and, if it doesn't work, then they're done. And, we had one of our guys in our group that stayed away from therapy for a long time because of that particular experience. So I think we need to encourage the veterans too that go to the VA to realize that they don't have to stay with the first person that they are assigned to if they don't want to. It's not a rule that that's what they have to do.
well, and they've come up with VA Choice, which gives people more options.
That's right. Yeah.
And I know one thing that stops people from doing even therapist shopping is they don't want to go and tell their story in the first place. And they certainly don't want to have to tell it again and again.
Yeah.
So a big piece of that might be just going in kind of interviewing to begin with. You don't even have to go into your personal information. I mean, they may be trying to get information from you, but you're also trying to assess if they're going to work for you. So maybe feeling like you don't have to tell your whole story while you're trying to find that good fit that you're comfortable with.
So as a therapist, then what are some general, and I know you can't be too specific because it's different for everybody, but what maybe are some general things or questions that people might look for when they're shopping for a therapist? I mean, I wouldn't even know. Well, I would know now because I've been through therapy, but before I went through therapy, I wouldn't even know what to look for.
Well, so let me ask you, I mean, I have some ideas about this, but what made you feel like it was right? Like, what made you feel comfortable enough to say, okay, this might work?
Well, I think the biggest difference was the first person they had me with treated me like, I was overreacting to my issues, and that, that I should just kind of, soldier on and try and get over it. Well, not really get over it, but he just didn't make me feel like I had a problem or like he cared much about my issues. I remember that first session with you. I actually went into that session with a bad attitude because of the experience I'd had with the other person. And so I went in there really not willing to give you a chance, but you made me feel comfortable because you didn't try and delve right into what was bothering me or anything like that. You just started talking to me. We just kind of had a conversation between two people, not patient or doctor, or, screwed up veteran to therapist or whatever it might be, but it was just kind of a conversation between the two of us. you just put me at ease, I think, is the best way to describe it.
Well, I think that's one of the bigger things you're looking for. You know, I know even when I'm working with the doctor, if they act like my problems are just in my mind, it's like I'm not really interested in continuing to work with that doctor. I mean, you know, sometimes maybe that there is truth in that, but also, you know, when we know what we live with, and, you know, they tell doctors, listen to your patients, they're the ones who know best. They really know what's going on, and it matters to listen and to start right where the patient is at.
Well, I'm sure you're like that with everybody that you gave therapy to, but I know that that was the way I felt that first time, and you know, that's actually what changed my mind and I decided to go back. I left that office that day feeling completely different than when I went in there. I have to tell you, I don't know if I've ever told you that before, but when I went in there that first day, I had I was just ready to say, you know, you're just like the other guy, and I don't want to do this anymore. And
That's fair. It's fair. And, you know, sometimes it's just being able to express that or express frustration that helps you be able to start calm down and talk. Just, you know, be where you're at.
so, is that the indication to you know, just kind of generally, that if your therapist can kind of make you feel comfortable at first, um, then is that a sign, a good indication that you're kind of on the right track, that you have a therapist that cares about your issues and wants to try and get you on the healing path?
Well, I think that's a huge part of it. You know, it's interesting. They say that, um, well, there's a big part of trauma that goes into our body. And I think when we feel safe, we will start working through the things that are our biggest stressors or keeping us in a difficult place. And it's like our body knows when we're in that place. And it's like learning to listen to ourselves. Do I feel safe enough here to start working through some of this? So that's a big part of it, I think.
Well,
Listening
and
to yourself.
it's interesting that you would say that. There's two comments I'd like to make to that. One, the group that you facilitated for us, that comment was brought up a lot of different times. On, you know, we felt safe in there. We didn't feel like people were gonna anybody in our group was going to judge us for anything. We all kind of had similar stories, and you know, we just kind of bonded because of that. And that is the reason for the ramp. Greg and I had a lot of experiences on the ramp of our Bradley, where we would talk, and you know, I mean, we did a lot of things on that ramp, but there was no judgment. There was no, you know, issues. Oh, we had issues occasionally, but you know, the ramp was the place we kind of worked those out. And I think, yeah, that's important for us to feel like we can talk about things and not feel belittled by any action or words because of what we say.
Yeah, and I'm sure you remember this, how much you did not want to join group.
Yeah. Yeah.
Most of the vets I worked with who were in that group, as a matter of fact, I think it was without exception, did not want to be in a PTSD group. It's like, I'm not going to go in there and talk in front of a bunch of other guys. I'm not comfortable doing that. It's just not who I am. I'm not going to. Like, how many weeks of that did we go through? And I kind of would keep tiptoeing on, I think this group would be good. I think you'd fit in there really well. I think you might be surprised. And it took a while to get there for you.
It did take a while, and you know, that's another indication of you know, your willingness to work with me, and is your patience. You knew what I needed, and you knew it would be good for me, but you know, it was going to take a while, and you knew, you know, it was going to take a while after. And I'm sure I'm not the only guy you went through that with. Like you said, everybody probably says, no, I don't want to go into the group. But yeah, it's but that's another indication of a good therapist, I think, is if they have the patience to help you along, and not get frustrated with, you know, not being able to move forward sometimes. That's why I I always thought it was funny that you didn't leave that group every single week shaking your head thinking, wow, I'm just not making any headway at all with these guys.
No, there was headway. I took those little pieces of you guys remembering certain things and using them in your day-to-day life. It's like that is progress. That is definite progress.
Well, I'm sure that you helped us all, because we all kept coming back. And I think that says a lot, that we liked being there, and that we got something out of being there. And so I think it was a good thing.
Well, can I just say too how much you guys helped each other? I mean, the therapist almost removed from it. You guys went in and made such a difference in each other's lives, and hearing each other's stories, supporting each other, identifying with what each other had been through and how you all dealt with things was a huge piece of how that group helped everyone. So,
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. It was a lot of give and take between just us veterans in there, and you guided us along, and helped us realize the right things to talk about and the right things to do about those issues. And it was, I mean, it's a support group, and that's what we did with each other, is support each other in our issues, and became very good friends because of it.
yeah, just a really close group. And, you know, they talk a lot about having your group be really cohesive and being similar. But we did have Vietnam veterans. We had some vets from Afghan and the Gulf. And we had a lot of different era veterans who helped each other. I mean, sometimes you older vets help the younger vets. Like, you really made a difference. And sometimes the thinking has not been to do that. Keep it separate. But what I witnessed was amazing in how you're willing to help and guide younger soldiers and veterans through the process of readjusting to life.
And
Platoon Daddy.
I I think that's you know, that's a big part of what we're trying to do here too, is
Yeah.
help the veterans, not only the veterans in my era and older. I'm a little too young to be a Vietnam guy, but you know, those guys, and the other guys coming forward, um, to help them through that path of you know, uncertainty, so to speak, not knowing what tomorrow's going to bring, not knowing how I'm going to deal with this. I belong to a PTSD group on Facebook, and boy, there's some people on that, in that group, that are just right on the edge, it seems like. And I wish that you know, they would understand. And I try and say things to help them understand that there's help out there and that they can find help and not to give up. But I'm hoping that that's something that we can accomplish through this podcast too.
It needs to happen. I mean, we know 1/5 of all homeless people are veterans. About 1/5 of suicides are veterans. Suicide is a lot of, substance abuse is a lot of veterans. And, it's just reaching out and needing help.
Yeah.
Totally needing help. And so anything that can start reaching out and saying there's people who care, there's resources, come back and see what life has to offer.
This is not in our outline here, but I just wanted to ask, when you call the hospital for different things, the VA anyway, one of the things that the pre-recorded message says is if you have thoughts of harming yourself or someone else, please call this number. You work on one of those numbers now. Tell us a little bit maybe of is that actually a good resource for people to have, as those suicide hotline numbers?
It definitely can be, yes. What I'm doing is related to COVID right now, but we definitely refer people to resources and try and connect them. We do as much as we can in the time that we have with them, and then we try and help get them where they need to be. And sometimes it's about people just not knowing what's out there. So, I worked with multiple people who called the VA national suicide number, and it helped them through a difficult moment. It just needs to not stop there. The healing work needs to continue until people really start feeling like they're in a solid place, and a lot of those symptoms of PTSD have been dramatically reduced, and they have tools to manage again.
Yeah, that's that's a good point that you say it shouldn't stop there. I often wonder if I'll ever get to a point where, this is something that I don't have to deal with anymore. And I'm certainly in a way better place than I was 5 years ago. But I still have days and times when, it kind of gets to me still. But like you say, there's tools that we have available to us. And one thing I mentioned to Greg about Debbie is she always had her arms full of resources when she came into our group, books and handouts and TED Talks. And I mean, she was just always full of resources and options for us to work with, to try and get ourselves on that right path. And the talking, I think, is a big part of it. I've mentioned that too, is one of the things that I've learned the most from my therapy is not being afraid to talk about it. And that's another reason why I wanted to start this podcast, is because it's a place where we can talk to each other and express our concerns and our issues.
Yeah, a lot of learning and things start with talking and seeing how it can be different. We know now there's so much physiology that goes into trauma and how it changes the body. It changes the wiring of your body. And there's so many different things that need to help people kind of reverse and heal some of that. Talking is a huge piece of it. There's other things that can help. Neurofeedback is something they're working on. Yoga, all kinds of different body therapies to help people learn to relax again. And I think so many people are like, I don't know what's wrong with me. I'm just different. And this can't change. but our bodies are amazing. They do all kinds of things to protect us. And there's truly reasons why they do what they do, but we also need to learn how to heal that and get to a place where we're not living on high alert and in constant stress.
Yeah. So, having worked with veterans that are out of the military, and this, I asked this question in the hopes of, people that are in a position to make some of these changes or suggestions. What would be, if you could sit in a room with some military decision makers, what would be your recommendation to them to help veterans before they discharge us?
So that was a huge thing that came up with a lot of vets when they would come home. I think most everyone, don't you go through Fort Hood?
I went through Fort Carson.
Fort Carson. Okay, so maybe there's different places, but they would do a short debriefing and send people on their way. And there wasn't a lot of looking at what was really going on with them. Well, we have learned, because I work with people who were part of a team where they put some instruments and start measuring, where are people really at on their PTSD as they're going through that debriefing, getting ready to be discharged. And, people, when they first, are in the situation getting ready to come home, don't really know they have PTSD. They don't really know they're different. It takes time to figure that out. You come home and you start seeing, well, life is different and I'm not the same person. And so now we definitely know that there needs to be more follow-up. We need to stay closer in offering services and having awareness of where people really are, and having open availability to those people who need it. And not everyone's going to be asking for it, but part of it is that reaching out and staying connected.
I know that one of the biggest problems with the VA is that they just aren't staffed enough. They don't have the staff to take care of the number of issues that they have. However, do you think that it might be a good idea for the active duty military to get people registered into the VA as part of that separation from the military, and not just throw them out there and then have this guy try and fight his way, this guy or gal try and fight their way into the VA system? You think that would be something that might be workable?
Yeah, I definitely think that makes a difference, not having to fight that. I think taking a lot of the stigma off, not having it affect their career negatively if they reach out for the help they need. I know there's concern, is someone stable to do certain things, but, somewhere it's got to be worked through that we are also allowing people the help they need. And we're not shutting doors on that. I went to a conference in Washington about PTSD. There was an active duty lieutenant who talked about the theory in the field when they were out there is if somebody came in and they were having some mental health issues, they would work with them for a couple of days and put them right out there, right back in the field. And, is that always the best answer to people who may need a little bit more intensive or time away or a break? Really making some good assessments and having some good options, not just having somebody be a, what was it you called? What you were considered coming home?
I don't know.
On a C-130.
Cargo.
Cargo. You're not just cargo.
Cargo.
You actually have value, and it matters to take care of your soldiers, their needs. That's a huge piece of keeping the machine running.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think that would go a long ways to boosting the morale of people in the military if they knew that they were actually going to get taken care of
Yeah.
after it was over. They might be a little bit better at what they do, or more willing to do, the things that the military asks them to do. It's interesting that you mentioned that lieutenant. Greg came up with a paper on our first podcast. We talked about the history of PTSD, and there was a part of that, and this was, I don't know how many years ago, where the prevailing thought was the guys that were experiencing what now is PTSD, but they called it I don't know, battle fatigue
Shell
or
shock, battle fatigue. Yeah.
this was way before that, though. But their prevailing thought was to try and heal them as close to the front as they could.
Yep.
And that didn't seem to work, did it, Greg? They didn't find much success.
I don't think it's well, according to Debbie, it still doesn't work.
Yeah.
But they're trying.
I'm trying.
But yeah, I mean,
how is you get right back on the horse and then you do good, but that's just not always the case.
Yeah. I mean, your brain is like
history
any
has
other.
Definitely said.
Your brain is like any other muscle that you have. It does need some rest occasionally, and if it's exposed to that horror, that trauma constantly, it's gonna end up being terrible for that person, I think.
Yep, you put enough psychological stress on most anyone and they'll eventually have problems.
Yeah.
And understanding that and addressing that, because it truly hardwires our brains to be different, to deal with enough trauma.
Well, and that kind of brings up the metaphor for our title of our podcast, the ramp, as well. The ramp itself is a door that comes down in the back of the Bradley, and the infantry guys inside can exit the vehicle very fast and be out of there within seconds. But within the ramp, they also have a troop door that opens up that only lets one person in or out at a time. And so the metaphor is, the ramp is down when we're going through all this trauma, when we're experiencing all this stuff, and it's letting all this stuff into our brains, but then it closes up on us, and we only have that little troop door now that we want to let things out a little bit at a time, and we're afraid to let that ramp down and let it all out at once. So
that's a good analogy, Monty.
That's I hope that we can that we can help people through what we're doing here. So one last question I'd have for you, Debbie, is if someone is not quite willing to go in to talk to someone, and in general, I know this area is vast and we could probably talk about it for hours, but what would be a good way for someone to study and learn about some tools that they might use to see if this stuff, well, not see, because I know it would help them, but to understand that this stuff would help them?
Well, we live in a world that there's so many options now. It's amazing. And I mean, just going to YouTube, you can pull so many different things on PTSD information, mindfulness. You know, a huge piece of helping people is starting to learn to start being in your parasympathetic nervous system way more than in your sympathetic, that fight or flight, like learning to calm down your whole nervous system and start allowing your brain to calm and your whole system start operating like it needs to. I mean, they're doing all kinds of research with the vagus nerve and how it's leading to all these autoimmune disorders. When we just get overly living in that nonstop state of PTSD and stress and all those stress hormones, we need to learn to calm our system. And even starting to do some of that work will start making a difference. There's peer-to-peer, there's groups that are online that are free, there's TED Talks that talk about things, there's books, there's a great book by Bessel van der Kolk, one of the leaders in PTSD treatment, on Your Body Keeps Score. He goes into a lot how it affects the body, but different treatments, different modalities, you know, what can work for people. Yoga can make a big difference. Forest therapy, we talked about just walking outside and starting to just relax through nature and taking that in and being at peace. So starting to do some simple things and even seeing if those make a difference. Maybe starting to try and find a safe place to talk, and then seeing what the world might open up to you. The biggest thing is we don't want people to give up hope. We don't want people to think that their life does not have meaning. I heard an amazing quote from a 100-year-old yesterday, and he said, if you have a pulse, you have a purpose. And people need to just find that their life has purpose and not give up. And that's why we want to work so much. I'm so proud of you for doing this podcast.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. That would be my sentiment exactly, that I don't want people to give up hope. I want them to understand that their life does matter to someone. And it's, there is a life worth living after the military or after your trauma experience, even if it's not in the military. So there is help out there for us. And Greg and I appreciate you coming on the podcast today, Debbie, and you're always such a wealth of knowledge and hope and encouragement. And I know I've told you this a number of times, but you literally saved my life, and I will always be thankful to you for that. And I hope that you know that there was at least one person out there that you saved from that brink of destruction. And I just can't thank you enough for that.
Thank you, Monty. I will tell you, the reward to me is seeing you happy in your life with your kids and your wife and your grandkids. I mean, that is a powerful reward. And I want to see that for so many people. So thank you for doing this.
Yeah. Okay, well, we'll kind of wrap it up then. Greg and I always want to put this disclaimer at the end saying that, you know, we're not experts in PTSD, we just have it. And so that's our expertise in this, and our experience is certainly not yours. Our way back to health may not be yours, but there is a way for everyone out there, and we just have to find it, and we have to make those fit. we have an email address. It's called the colorblindarmyguy@gmail.com. The colorblind army guy is all one word, no space or caps. The colorblindarmyguy@gmail.com. We also have a Facebook page called the Colorblind Army Guy. We put our podcasts on there. We put information on there that that we've done research on, things that can help us, papers and articles and video experiences of people that are dealing with this. So I encourage you to visit that Facebook page and see if there's something on there that can help you. And if you have questions or comments on our podcast, please send us an email to the colorblind army guy @gmail.com. Again, we want to thank Debbie for coming on. I've asked her if she might be a regular guest for us here and come on every 2 or 3 months or so, and she didn't say yes or no, but I'm kind of hoping that she's gonna say yes. But anyway, thanks again, Debbie. We sure appreciate it. We hope that you the rest of your week, and we'll be talking to you again soon.
Thanks, Monty.
This is Monty Garlic, and we are out of here, and see you next time.